And the Badgers just keep rolling along. It's a historic season in Madison through 6 games. We got Tyler Hunt on the line here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. You can join Tyler and the rest of the staff there at Bucky's Fifth Quarter on SB Nation. Tyler, how you doing today?
Good. Really good. Excited to keep watching the Badgers. Hopefully they keep rolling. But this time they got to go back on the road. They've been at home for 6 weeks now. So it'll be a nice little road test at Illinois before going to, of course, Buckeye Stadium to take on Ohio State the following week.
I guess so. As soon as you said that about 6 straight weeks at home, I was wondering if they had any road games, because typically they play the easy games, and they didn't admittedly have the toughest non-conference slate, but they did make the one trip to South Florida to start the season, but have been home ever since with the 2 Big Ten games against Michigan and Michigan State. Speaking of which, Tyler, I know Michigan State's having their issues, but they still field one of the best defenses in the country, and they still have Power 5 caliber offensive players, and they're still going to win their share of games this year. And my goodness, that was just an obliteration.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great performance on both sides of the football. Obviously, the offense played really crisp. Jack Cohn could do pretty much whatever he wanted, and he was hitting all his passes. I think he only had 3 incompletions in that entire game. But the big storyline is, again, the defense. I mean, we were debating on our podcast early in the week which shutout has been the most dominant, and when you've had 4 of them, it's crazy to have a conversation like that. But the defense has been so solid, and I would say last week's performance really was their best one. They shut down the run. And Brian Lewerke and Rocky Lombardi, when he came into the game, they just couldn't get anything going. I mean, you talk about the guys, they have some receivers over at Michigan State, and they really couldn't get going either. And we thought that maybe that was the area that Wisconsin might let up a little bit, given that the secondary hasn't been tested too much this season. But so far, so good, and they held up their end of the deal in some pretty big fashion on a big stage. So
I'm going to make the comment that I still think the most impressive defensive effort was against Michigan, just considering the talent on the other side of the ball and the 14 points being completely inconsequential after a 35-0 lead. So that almost speaks to a shutout to me. I know that they've got 4, and one of the more remarkable statistics that's being thrown around this week is that Wisconsin has scored 4 touchdowns. They've allowed 4 touchdowns, and they also have how many shutouts at this point?
Yeah, they've got 4 so far.
Yes, 4. My goodness, it's those numbers are obviously not going to stand. They're not going to be able to maintain that for the rest of the season, or maybe they will. Maybe I shouldn't doubt that they will, but it's just they could actually play more impressive defense going forward, especially against Ohio State, and give up maybe 17 or 20 in that game, then give up 0 to some other teams. But what in fact is it? Can you really point to anything in particular that separates this Wisconsin defense from previous Wisconsin defenses that have been outstanding, that I think of as having tremendous front sevens? The linebacker core is rock solid, technique, just on all levels, maybe not the most athletic in the country compared to some of the elite teams, but just technique-wise and in terms of being sound, as good as any. And this one is just a cut above.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different things. Obviously, the defensive line health last year was a big concern. They had some guys banged up in that area last year, but then they've certainly bounced back and been a big help. But then the linebacking core has really been solid. You look at that last year, they had guys like Ryan Connolly and Andrew Van Ginkel, and guys who were used to the system, and they had to fill that in with some new roles, and those guys haven't missed a beat. But I think the biggest thing really is Wisconsin's defensive coordinator. I think Jim Leonard is one of the best coordinators in the country, and if he was coaching offense, he would be on the short list for a lot of jobs, both at the college level and probably at the pro level, because he's so good at his craft and so good at what he does, and I don't think he gets enough credit and enough attention. But it's going to be hard for Wisconsin, I think, to retain him as the season goes on. Or as his career goes on, I should say, because he's so talented and they're really good at what he's done. And I think he just gets guys in the right position, and that really helps them execute, and it helps the defense grow, and players who are lower on the depth chart still know the scheme and know what to look for, and it benefits them in a big way.
Got Tyler Hunt on the line from Bucky's Fifth Quarter. It's the Wisconsin platform on SB Nation, so please join him and the rest of the staff right now. Of course, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We bring on the best bloggers, broadcasters, writers in the nation to set you up each and every week for college football. And this is week 8 coming up in Madison or in Champaign. Trip to Champaign, Illinois, after 5 consecutive home games. And Illinois is going to be taken lightly by maybe the fan base, maybe by just neutral observers that say, okay, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Ohio State, Ohio State. That's the thought. Illinois should not be much of a challenge on one hand. On the other hand, it was a 28-25 game against Michigan with about 10 minutes left. Nebraska came to Champaign. They put up 38 on Nebraska. I know Nebraska is having their issues, and we can't compare them to Wisconsin at this point, but this is not nearly the ineptitude that we've seen at Illinois for the past 5 to 10 years in this particular team, Tyler.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that goes too with Wisconsin's spot. They've had a few situations this year already. Like you look at Central Michigan, they had Michigan the next week where you thought maybe a flat spot would come, simply because they had that big games next week, and of course with Ohio State on the schedule next week, this could be a situation where maybe there is a flat spot. But so far, I don't have any reason to buy into that. So given what Wisconsin's done, they've been very consistent over the 6 games, but it's still a new test because it's not in the comfort of Camp Randall, and you've got to go on the road and against a team that has struggled and lost 4 straight, but it's their homecoming, and it's a new test. So it'll be interesting to see how the Badgers respond. But Illinois still has some players. They've landed some of those transfers that are pretty solid, and they've still got, I think, one of the most underrated backs in the Big Ten, and Reggie Corbin. So it'll be good. It'll be a good road test the week before going for an even bigger road test against Ohio State.
Absolutely. Talking Wisconsin football with the Badgers lining up against the Illini in Champaign coming up this week. It's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please lock it in here. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Okay, everybody's talking about Ohio State in 2 weeks, but Illinois front and center. First road game in 5 games for Wisconsin as they go to Champaign. Illinois, we talked about that they're still one of the bottom dwellers in the Big Ten, but they gave Michigan a challenge. They gave Nebraska certainly a challenge. They do have some explosiveness on offense. If you want to run down, what you've prepped in preparing for the Illini.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that team. Reggie Corbin is still their star, and last year he had 100 yards on the ground against the Badgers, but 80 yards of that was on one big long run. But he's still explosive. He's a 1,000-yard rusher in the Big Ten, so he's got a lot of talent, and I think he'll be playing on Sundays and at the next level. And then at the same time, you've got some talented receivers. They've landed, transfers from USC that have really shown that they have the talent. We were talking with our SB Nation sister site from Illinois, and they said this is one of the most talented receiving corps that Illinois has had since since the Geronimo Allison days, who Wisconsin and Packer fans are probably familiar with. But the issue really for them has been getting those guys to football. Whether it be Brandon Peters or the other guys that have worked in there because of his injuries, they've struggled to pass the ball. They're in the 110 to 130 range in most passing categories, and it's been a huge struggle for them to distribute the football to their playmakers. And I think if you're Wisconsin, you're definitely going to have to key on Corbin and shut down the run and make Illinois beat you through the passing game, because they haven't done very well with it this season. So it'd be a nice little test for the secondary, possibly again, if Peters comes back and plays the way we've seen him do it in the past. We're obviously Wisconsin fans are pretty familiar with Peters, given his time at Michigan and his infamous injury on that national scale against Wisconsin. So.
Yeah, Brandon Peters certainly looks the part of a Big Ten quarterback. Didn't have a light-up season for Michigan, that particular one in which he did suffer the injury at Camp Randall, but won his fair share of ball games for an 8-5 Michigan team and played fairly well, but obviously not well enough to keep the starting job. He moves on a couple stops here, and he's at Illinois right now at 58% completion percentage, 10 touchdowns and 4 picks. They brought in this Matt Robinson last week. He was quite limited against Michigan, just in regards to evaluating his skill set. I saw about half the game, but they did have that scurry of 25 consecutive points. You mentioned the USC transfer, Josh Imatorbhebhe. He's got 20 catches, about 300 yards. He's been a factor as a tight end, and Ricky Smalling has been around the Big Ten for quite some time, producing decent numbers for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've, like you said, they've got talent on that, in that receiving core, and if they find a way to really get them the ball consistently, when we were talking with the SB Nation sister side, they said they really like the offensive scheme that they've got. They like the offensive coordinator. They like everything about it. It just hasn't really executed on the field. And even when recruiting, they said they're a fan of Lovie Smith and what he's doing on that side. But the schemes and the game plan just haven't quite worked out for them so far.
Yeah, I have little doubt that if they can get the ball to these guys in space, that they could do some damage and make it interesting for a while. But the issue is their offensive front blocking Wisconsin, the issues at quarterback, and so forth. And then the issues, the complete other side of the football, where they certainly have their struggles and have for the last decade, and that really hasn't been addressed, despite Lovie Smith's background of being a defensive guru in the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, Jonathan Taylor's certainly going to get his opportunities on Saturday to make some plays. I think Wisconsin's going to keep it on the ground, given those struggles for sure. I
would like to take a guess on Reggie Corbin's yards per carry, 5.9 coming in. What's he do against Wisconsin? If he breaks 3, I think that's about the over/under.
Yeah, that's probably where I'd put it, given what Wisconsin has done. I mean, that front seven has just been so dominating so far. You've seen, coming into the Michigan and Michigan State games, they have young running backs, but they really thought that those guys would be special, and they were shut down so far. And even though the season opener, Jordan Cronkite from South Florida was a pretty talented runner, and he was shut down. But I think Corbin will probably be the best test that the Badgers have faced so far this season. And I think it's a good test to be on the road against a talented running back, because you're going to get that next week, and a guy both with Justin Fields running the football and then J.K. Dobbins out of the backfield. So being on the road and getting a talented running back in the Big Ten who's had experience and done it before is a good test for this Wisconsin defense.
All right, Tyler, appreciate you stepping by to break down the Badgers as always.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.